Then, the threat of gender extremism laid bare as a trans rapist found guilty of 2 sex attacks when previously a man is egregiously sent to a women's prison. Fleet Street icon Calvin Mackenzie lets loose on the scandalous story that proves Sturgeon's dangerous gender reform bill must be stopped. He's here at 10:45. Also coming up, as even sources close to Meghan brief against her own husband's book project, has Prince Harry damaged his own reputation with that bile-filled memoir? To Kevin Maguire, Niall Gardner and Angela Epstein face off in the clash at 9:20. Plus, with former Daily Telegraph editor Charles Moore adding to the shifting narrative by writing that he believes Prince Andrew may be innocent, were we too quick to dismiss the disgraced Duke? Top lawyer turned star US journalist Megyn Kelly gives her expert analysis at 9:50. Then, as a new study shows that over half of households take more from the state than they put in, Westminster's toughest talking MP joins me to expose the truth about Benefit Britain. Lee Anderson gives us a much-needed dose of his real world live at 10:20. Not even a month into 2023 and the MSM's pitchforks are sharpened for another Tory witch hunt.
Nadeem Zahawi's taxes is no longer just a problem for Nadeem Zahawi, it's a problem for Rishi Sunak.
I'll explain why the constant hysteria from activist journalists is anti-democratic and damaging the country in my digest next. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. Tonight, I'm joined by Amanda Patel, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid. And what happened when one of my superstar panel turned up the heat on globalist shill Greta Thunberg and Davos?
You seem to be joining the establishment, not fighting them anymore. Are you not one of them?
One of who?
Find out more as I crown today's greatest Britain in Union Jackass at 10:50. We'll have a first look at tomorrow's newspapers coming up too. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. My digest on this series of MSM witch hunts coming up in just a moment. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. And we continue with that breaking news we brought you an hour ago, that it's been confirmed that British aid workers Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry have been confirmed as being killed during an evacuation in Ukraine. The family issued a statement saying it is with great sadness we have to announce that our beloved Chrissy has been killed along with his colleague Andrew Bagshaw while attempting a humanitarian evacuation from Soledar in eastern Ukraine. The pair had been attempting to rescue, we understand, an elderly woman in the area where there was intense military action. Their car, we understand, was hit by an artillery shell. They were last seen on January the 6th and had been reported missing, but now confirmation coming to us that those British aid workers, Chris Parry and Andrew Bagshaw, are confirmed as having died in the act of a humanitarian gesture in Ukraine. Well, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has reportedly decided to send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine and is allowing other countries like Poland to do the same. Reports suggesting a decision on whether or not to allow Poland to send tanks to Ukraine could be confirmed as early as this week. The Polish Defence Minister saying just today the request comes as the security of the whole of Europe was at stake. And Boris Johnson urged other countries to follow the UK's lead in providing tanks and the weapons the Ukrainians need to win the war. Now news here at home, and a relative of the murder victim Zara Alina says probation officers have blood on their hands after a report found her killer had been released from prison just days before he carried out the attack. Jordan McSweeney was given a life sentence last month after he admitted killing the law graduate. He attacked 35-year-old Zara in East London as she walked home after a night out last June. The findings of the report show McSweeney should have been treated as a high risk of serious harm offender, but was wrongly graded by the probation service as a medium risk. Zara's aunt, Farah Naz, says more needs to be done to avoid the same thing happening again.
Our streets are not safe. Probation work has to be tight, has to be high quality, because the risks, the stake is high. The stake is lives. Zara's life was taken, and probation have blood on their hands.
Zara Alina's aunt. Well, lastly, Princess Eugenie and her husband, Jack Brooksbank, are said they're thrilled to be expecting their second child. A photograph released on Instagram today by the Princess shows the couple's first child, August, hugging his mum's pregnant tummy. In a statement, the palace said the royal family is delighted and August is very much looking forward to being a big brother. That's all from me. Back to Dan.
Have you noticed something has changed since a media witch hunt forced our largely popular, democratically elected Brexit-delivering Prime Minister, who won office in a landslide just 2 years ago? The MSM, especially the British-bashing corporations Sly News and our other laughably so-called impartial broadcasters, have become drunk on their own power. They relish in it, not reporting the issues that are really facing Brits, like the cost of lockdown crisis, the war on women, and how the deranged march to net zero is destroying our ability to live freely, but rather playing pathetic and petty Westminster parlour games designed to claim yet another scalp. With Sunak back in power, the establishment no longer wants to defenestrate the Prime Minister, but create a culture of chaos to help lead Labour to the election under slippery starmer. The creation of an activist MSM has not gone unnoticed by viewers of GBNews, desperate for an alternative to that narrative. It started with wallpaper, anti-Brexit coverage before leading to the disgraceful, one-sided pro-lockdown COVID diatribe as millions of us gave up on the Beeb and the others as an impartial news source. But today, I want to focus in specifically on their witch hunts against our leaders, even when their so-called crimes pale into insignificance compared to the real issues of the day. First, they relentlessly came for their biggest threat, Boris Johnson.
I asked you, yes.
In the meantime,
okay.
you promised to get onto the. I think people always hear. Well, you did promise. You did promise to get onto the substance of this trip.
And I think Ben from the BBC did 7 minutes on Partygate, and I'm sure I haven't done as much as that. So
well,
I'm just
this isn't the kind of competition to see who can do more.
I'm just saying.
Why don't you get onto the subject of?
We are entering the end game. However you look at it, the Prime Minister is done.
This massively piles the pressure on the Prime Minister.
We've had people on his own side who did support him merely weeks ago who are saying it's over. And it is over.
Do you think, a lot of people saying, even if the Prime Minister wins this is the beginning of the end for him? Can he really recover if they don't get the numbers?
Once they knew it was possible to unseat such a significant and large figure, Liz Truss never stood a chance, even though she was backed overwhelmingly by the Conservative Party.
First few weeks of your time in office has felt chaotic, has felt like you don't have a plan, that you're out of control in some way.
I think voters are just tired of a lack of honest answers. I'm just saying to you, you're not minded to do it.
Despite a new Chancellor, despite those U-turns, you can't see how she can survive.
A cabinet, minister speaking out against what appears to be your position is you not in control. Your MPs will throw you out.
Andrew, how long has she got?
I think if she doesn't go today, they'll get her out next week or the week after.
With 2 PMs removed, the Westminster witch hunt has continued at pace. The first target, you'll remember, was the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
Ideally, the Prime Minister needs to persuade her to resign again of her own free will, saying she's realised she's become a distraction. If not, then I'm afraid he has to show her the door.
But Prime Minister Rishi Sunak stood outside the front door and said yesterday lunchtime, I want to restore integrity. And then a few minutes later, appoint somebody as Home Secretary in charge of national security who admitted breaching the ministerial code 6 days earlier. What does that say about integrity in government?
It is a bit rich for the Home Secretary to claim that she is the victim of a political witch hunt on the day that she herself is forced to admit that she has broken the ministerial code not once, for which she was sacked, but 6 times.
That one didn't work, so then they went for Dominic Raab.
We've seen Dominic Raab saying there's going to be an investigation into allegations of bullying by him. We saw allegations of the same sort against Priti Patel as Home Secretary. We've seen them against Gavin Williamson. What's wrong with this government?
So how is this different to what happened with Sir Gavin Williamson, who, you know, he was in a similar position and then he resigned a couple of days later?
This is all becoming very difficult for Dominic Raab. When a minister is in the firing line for this long and with such pressure, you do have to wonder about their future.
That one hasn't worked either yet. So then they went for Gavin Williamson.
What sort of man is Gavin Williamson? He doesn't seem a particularly pleasant bloke or boss.
Rishi Sunak stands on the steps of Downing Street and says he's bringing integrity back into government. The question stands, how does bringing back Sir Gavin Williamson with his record reflect integrity?
I don't think viewers will think this morning there has to be some sort of big investigation. He did something he shouldn't have done that was obviously very unpleasant for the person who received those text messages. The Prime Minister knew there was a complaint about him bullying people and he gave him a job anyway.
Ding, ding, ding. They claimed another scalp. So now it's the Tory party chairman, Nadhim Zahawi, they want out. Even though there's an acknowledgement he likely hasn't broken any law. That doesn't matter. The media just wants another victim to hunt down.
Nadhim Zahawi's taxes is no longer just a problem for Nadhim Zahawi, it's a problem for Rishi Sunak.
This just looks so bloody otherworldly. It just looks abnormal. And you know why? Because it is abnormal.
If I was Sunak, I would do the brutal and necessary thing, and I would do it this very day.
It's a bit of a theme developing from that former BBC impartial presenter, right? I mean, while our single-minded anti-Tory journalists now seem to think that HMRC get everything right, that's not the point. The point is, it's not up to the media to campaign to remove democratically elected politicians, stripping them of the ability to do their job. Uncover crimes and wrongdoing, absolutely. But the activist MSM is now on a perpetual and personal witch hunt, which is bad for democracy. To respond now, my superstar panel, top Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the GBNews presenter and commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. So look, Amanda, this is not now a one-off. This is not the fact that they are so horrified by what they think Nadhim Zahawi may have done. This has become a game for the MSM. They're hunting down high-profile Tories one by one.
Well, I actually much prefer that metaphor, the hunting down, to the witch hunt, because that's like some little old lady that they're going to kind of, you know, burn for sins that don't exist. The MSM, as I know, because I've worked within it, and I've worked within the BBC as well, they're like trophy hunters, and they work in packs. And they will share information with each other. They will share leads and tips they've got. Obviously, if they've got an exclusive, they'll keep it to themselves. But they have put a target on his head, on the chairman of the Tory party's head, and they're determined to get him. They've only found one Tory MP who has said that not even should he resign, but that he should stand down for a bit. And that was Caroline Noakes, who is an arch-Remainer, who was the only rebel who voted for Brexit to be paused.
The wettest of the wet
Tories.
Tories.
Delayed. They've only got one Tory who's speaking out against him.
And that lit the BBC today. They were so excited about that. They were delighted with that.
I know this. And you just can't, you know, poor old Zahim, you just got to constantly seeing all these references to him. According to the information we have, he has not broken the law. He is... according to the HMRC, there will be, and I've got to check my notes here, Dan, which is always a worry.
Oh, goodness.
12 million people will get fined this year for late payment of their taxes, which are due at the end of this month. And a lot of people I know will be part of them. And what I don't get about why, Nadeem he should be a poster boy for this country. He arrived here as a refugee. They were penniless. His family built up, a life for themselves. He became a self-made multi-millionaire developing...
Yeah, but we don't celebrate that.
YouGov. We don't celebrate all the brilliance of him.
And certainly the left...
And they're all after him. They're just... If you just imagine those scenes, like in The Lion King, where the jackals are hunting down and they all act as a pack, that's what we have now in the British media, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. And the problem is, Calvin, right? Look, their job is to find stories where they exist. Their job is not to dictate whether someone is sacked from a position to which they've been democratically elected through a process. And I actually feel this is so political with Zahawi because actually there's lots of questions to be asked about HMRC and the way that they hunt down multi-millionaires in this country, because what they often try to do is shame them into a settlement. And I think what happened with Zahawi is he knew he had this really high-profile job. He wanted HMRC off his back, so he thought, I'm just going to pay even though I've done nothing wrong. He thought he was doing the right thing. That's not necessarily to defend him. I don't know the ins and outs of the case. But certainly neither do all of those people in the media who are calling for his head.
Well, they've given up their tactics. In the clip that you showed, they said no one can stay in the firing line for this long. They know if they keep it on, if they sustain the attack for a certain amount of time.
And they're the assassins.
They are the assassins.
They're the assassins.
And they're
a firing
they
squad.
have that power. They've showed they can use that power, and they will keep doing so until they get the people that they want. However, when Caroline Noakes speaks against someone, it kind of makes me want to defend them, because she is the least conservative person in the party. But where I am concerned with Nadeem Zahawi is, of course, his whole stance on lockdowns and COVID and the vaccines and all of that. But I understood that he didn't have any stake in YouGov anymore. I understood that he'd separated himself from YouGov when he became a politician. But all of this is about the money that he made from YouGov. Yeah. And we know that YouGov backs the government every step of the way on lockdowns, on vaccines, mandates, all of that. So I find that very suspicious. That needs an investigation.
Indeed, but that's a different question to what we're dealing with here today. I mean, I think the point Calvin makes is really fascinating, Rebecca. It's about the length of time that the media keeps a story in the headlines. And I think they learnt that from Partygate. So much was going on, right, in the country. And ITV News and Sly News and BBC News decided for a 3-month period that they would lead every single bulletin on Partygate because they wanted Boris out that badly.
This is such rubbish. OK, first of all,
How is
the media... So many reasons.
Well, go on.
Let me. To start with, the media's job is
I'm going to revel in this.
And but Calvin.
Is that because of her T-shirt?
Anyway, to focus, please. Most talking to myself now. The media's job is to report on what is happening. This is what is happening. Also, when you work in digital journalism, you have real-time reports on what people care about. And the reason stories get hammered and hammered and hammered is because it gets traffic. Now, we know from the expenses scandal and also from the celebrity tax evasion situation, remember the Jimmy Carr one from the noughties? We know that people get obsessed because what do people hate? Paying their taxes. What do people also hate? Feeling like celebrities don't have to do the same things that they do. Therefore, this is a perfect storm. The reason that people keep writing about it, people like me included, is because people care. People click on it. It is not some grand delusion. I don't go to an MSM meeting where they say, who are we going to screw up this week? We go to a meeting where they say, can you get some more clicks, please? And we write about things that get clicks.
You're not part of the Westminster Press Pack.
Well, no, OK.
You're not part of...
But I do write...
Heston
but I write for the mainstream media.
And Rigby, who actually do hunt in a pack. I mean, Amanda, you were the head of the Tory party communication.
You've seen it, and they just literally pile into you, know.
But that's their job.
No, they actually collude.
But
that's what I'm saying.
Their job is to hold people to account.
Is not their job.
It's not their job to
sit down together.
That's good journalism.
To sit down together. No, it's not. To sit down together and share information and say, right, there's a target on this guy's head or this woman's head, and we're all going to go for him. And if you come to him from all directions, then there becomes this incredible pressure where people say, if it's on this front page of it's on the headline of every news for 10 days, as Alistair Campbell said, you're dead.
Exactly. I fundamentally disagree. I think this smacks of our MPs keep doing stupid things getting reported on, so we're going to complain that the media is being mean to them. If you don't do bad things, the media can't write about you doing bad things. Stop doing bad things.
Do you think they have the same approach with Labour that they have?
Labour aren't in power and haven't been for 13 years. It's not balanced, and it shouldn't have to be because they haven't made any decisions.
It should have to be balanced.
How do you balance?
Well, how you balance it for a start is you take down Keir Starmer having passed
in
during
power.
Partygate. He was the leader of the
He's
opposition.
not in power.
Only the Daily Mail.
He is a considerably less important figure.
It doesn't matter.
When he is Prime Minister, he should be under the same scrutiny. He's not the Prime Minister.
Rebecca.
No, it's not.
It's really naive
when
to
the
think
party
that-
is in power, they get more scrutiny. That's how it should be.
Let's see, Rebecca. Let's see.
Yeah.
Rebecca Reed.
See you next year, guys.
Amanda Patel, my superstar panel, are here all night. But Brexit beacon Nigel Farage is still to come and asking how was a convicted criminal from Afghanistan able to freely enter the UK to kill again? Farage with me live at 9:35. But first, I couldn't believe this today, as even Meghan sources close to Meghan, begin to brief against Harry's book project. Has the Duke of Sussex damaged his own reputation with his vengeful memoir? Fleet Street figurehead Kevin Maguire goes up against foreign policy analyst Niall Gardner and celebrated journalist Angela Epstein. But I want to know what you think. Email me, Dan at gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll at GB News. The results and the clash straight after the break.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for The Clash. And one thing conspicuously absent from Prince Harry's unhinged spare publicity blitz, apart from the Duke's sanity, was his darling wife, Meghan. That hugely significant fact has been largely lost in the explosive drama of Harry's countless media appearances. But was the Duchess's distance deliberate? Well, in an extraordinary off-the-record briefing that hasn't been denied by the Sussexes yet, sources close to Meghan have tried to distance her from Harry's constructive tell-all. I couldn't believe this when I read it today. So this is what the source close to Meghan told the Daily Telegraph. Is this the way she would have approached things? Possibly not. But she will always back him and would never have got involved in promoting such a personal project. This was about his own life, his own journey, his own perspective. So, with even sources close to Meghan beginning to brief against her husband's book project, seemingly on her behalf, has Prince Harry damaged his own reputation with his bile-filled memoir? Let me know your thoughts on dan@gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll at GB News. But to debate this first, I'm joined by the Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, former Margaret Thatcher aide, Niall Gardner, and the journalist and broadcaster, Angela Epstein. So, Angela, I found this briefing today to the Daily Telegraph absolutely fascinating because it was the first sign of Meghan trying to distance herself from all of the collateral PR damage caused by Spare.
Well, good evening, everybody. Do we really think so? Because, you know, sometimes it seems that everything's about as genuine as the Tooth Fairy where those two are concerned, and nothing is done without some kind of strategy or monetising the misery behind everything that's gone on. I mean, there's no doubt that Harry has absolutely commoditised every single aspect of his life, and he certainly deserves all the criticism that he's got, because first of all, he fired the first salvo, and second of all, nothing is sacred. So-called private conversations have been paraded all over the place. He's targeted people who he knows cannot answer back, mainly his brother, his sister-in-law, his father, because of the never complain, never explain philosophy that underpins the whole of the palace strategy. And, you know, his regrettable comments about how many Taliban he's alleged to have killed also puts various people in a vulnerable position, namely people in the armed forces and himself, his family. So maybe it's possible that, I can't read Meghan's mind, and I'm sure there's a lot to read there, that she's perhaps not entirely predicted the fallout and has therefore stepped away, or conversely, because they've had a scattergun approach to their misery, they're monetising their misery, giving gobbets to different people to maximise the exposure. It may be that this is all part of the strategy. I just feel with those two, nothing is without some kind of forward planning.
Kevin Maguire, it's interesting for you as a Republican because I would argue that actually this book has done Harry more damage than the monarchy. In fact, I think this book has galvanised the British public who maybe were a little bit questioning of the idea of King Charles. I think it's galvanised us behind our new monarch.
Dan, I don't think that assessment would be much comfort to William and Camilla, or even Charles, who, when he has his coronation in May, there'll be 2 empty seats, his son and the son's wife, and that'll be very telling for a dad, never mind a man who wants to be a monarch and reign for the whole country. Well, there's 2 people he won't be reigning for at the very least. But I think we should applaud him, Harry, for writing this book, letting us get into his mind and letting us know what goes on, instead of just having a view of the monarchy that's a myth, it's a fairy tale, it's a bit of Disney, as if they're all marvellous, wonderful people. And Angela, as a journalist, if she could have got half the Harry stories from somebody, she would have been writing about them and giving them. He's done it himself.
Well, we did. We did write these stories, Kevin, and he and Meghan lied about them at the time and denied it, and now they've come out in the book and said, oh, by the way, they were all true, and it was even worse.
Absolutely, Dan, and they deserve criticism for that. And yeah, he's invaded other people's privacy. He's invaded his own.
He's done far worse than any tabloid journalist. Now, look, Niall Gardner, how do you respond to that from Kevin Maguire? Because he actually says that Prince Harry should be celebrated for blowing the whistle on the royal family. Now, I know that's not how you feel, Niall.
Yeah, quite the opposite, Dan. And in fact, my view is that Harry's hatchet job attack on the royal family has been a really vicious piece of work, actually, and it's spectacularly backfired, fortunately, upon both Harry and Meghan here. And I think the British public have turned Harry really into a pariah. as a result of this very nasty book. Also in the United States as well, the popularity of Harry and Meghan has fallen significantly. And I do think that Harry and Meghan definitely underestimated the level of backlash there was going to be against Spare. Hence the reason why I think Meghan has been rather quiet. After all, she has treated Harry, I think, like a useful idiot for many, many years. And now Harry is undermining the Meghan brand. And obviously she's not happy about that, actually. This book has been a spectacular disaster, I think, in terms of the image and standing
So
of
Niall,
Meghan and Harry
you
on
think
both sides
that
of the
this
Atlantic.
briefing to the Daily Telegraph, because that's fascinating analysis, you think this briefing to the Daily Telegraph could be Meghan making her first, it's a small start, but it could be her starting for the first time to sort of distance herself a little bit from Harry, which a lot of us have expected for a long time.
I do think we are beginning to see divisions in camp Harry and Meghan, because this book has been absolutely disastrous, I think, for their standing and their image. And I think there will be fallout from this. And I would not be surprised if Meghan is deeply unhappy about the backlash the book has received, and she's unhappy about Harry's performance. And after all, this is all about Meghan, ultimately. I do think Harry, in some respects, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Meghan Markle and her brand.
Kevin, is Meghan still a pin-up?
Disastrous in many respects.
Yeah, Kevin, is Meghan still a pin-up for lefties like you?
She was never a pin-up for lefties like me. I don't curtsy, bow, scrape, tug a forelock, or do any of that for any of them. But remember, they were the fresh new face of the royal family. They had Harry, who was incredibly popular. She came from the States. There was a glamour around her. She was a woman of colour. And it all went disastrously wrong. And I suspect it went wrong because she did encounter snobbery, maybe some racism, although I know Harry has since said there's no racism in the royal family, which probably means they'll have to hand back that prize they accepted in the States for exposing institutional
they won't do that. They won't do that.
She could also be incredibly pushy and a ruthless social climber at the same time. But
no kidding. So she's no left-wing pin-up. Well, that's a good thing. Associate Editor for the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, thank you so much. Thank you, too, to former Margaret Thatcher aide Niall Gardner and the journalist and broadcaster Angela Epstein. But who do you agree with? As even sources close to Meghan start to brief against her husband's book project, has Harry damaged his own reputation with his bile-filled book? Ahern on Twitter says, yes, he has. And this is proof, if ever it was needed, that Meghan is out for herself. Her husband's book project has failed miserably, and she will now distance herself from it as much as possible. Lady T writes, he's not just damaged his own reputation, but that of the entire royal family. And from Mike, can you damage an already horrific reputation? Maybe not. Your verdict, now in. A whopping 92% of you agree that Harry has damaged his own reputation. Just 8% of you say he hasn't. Coming up, sticking with the royals, as the former Daily Telegraph editor Charles Moore pens a column in defence of the disgraced royals, should Britain reconsider the exile of Prince Andrew? Top lawyer turned media maestro Megan Cully joins me live from the States with analysis on this at 9:50. It's going to be unmissable, that. But first, with news that an Afghan migrant who had killed before was able to trick himself into the UK to kill again, how was he able to just slip through our net? GB News star Nigel Farage speaks out on this live straight after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What the Farage time now, and as Border Force predict the number of Channel migrants could double this year to 80,000. Just how did a convicted killer con the Home Office with a bogus asylum claim that saw him go on to murder an aspiring Royal Marine? I mean, this story is just infuriating. So, this is Lauren Green Abdulrahim Zai, who fled Serbia in 2018 after committing a double murder before having an asylum application rejected in Norway. But a year later, the 21-year-old arrived in England on a ferry from France and was allowed to stay after telling officials he was a 14-year-old whose parents were killed by the Taliban. Yesterday, he was found guilty of stabbing 21-year-old Thomas Roberts to death during an argument over an e-scooter in Bournemouth town centre last year. British officials were unaware of his previous convictions, including the 20-year jail sentence he dodged for the Serbia murders. He had also been convicted of drug dealing in Italy, was caught carrying a knife after arriving in England and beat up a man in the street just weeks before he killed Thomas. This is the moment cops arrested the Afghani last year.
Listen, during the early hours of Saturday, the 12th of March 2022, an individual in Old Christchurch Road, Bournemouth, was stabbed and subsequently died. Inquiries have established that you have been responsible and therefore you're arrested on suspicion of murder. I've got to caution you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something later on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
Nigel Farage, I mean, this story is upsetting and infuriating. Obviously, the first thing to say is our thoughts are with the family of the victim whose lives have been completely destroyed by this murderer. But it's why you have been warning for such a long time about the people that we are allowing to enter our country illegally. This is the sort of damage that they can wrought.
Legions of young men, Dan, coming into the country. But in his case, clearly, between boarding the ferry in Cherbourg and arriving in the UK, lost his passport. Lost his passport. So we can't check who he is. And I was out with Mark White, our Home Affairs editor, last summer out of Dover. And we actually filmed people in a boat crossing into the 12-mile line into British waters. We witnessed them throwing their iPhones into the sea, their passports into the sea, so that nobody can check who they are. Then this guy turns up and says, I'm 14. And we say, oh, you poor little boy. We'll find you a nice foster carer. I mean, oh, we'll put you into school. I mean, the whole thing is a complete and utter joke at that level. But what I've been warning about, Dan, isn't just the fact that now this is an open door for criminals to come into Britain. I've also been warning about national security, that this guy may be a criminal murderer, but who's to say there aren't terrorists among them? And maybe the most worrying thing about this case is that last week, TikTok was absolutely full of Afghans boasting they'd got their right to remain documents. So the way Rishi is going to deal with the backlog is to basically let anyone who comes in and says they're Afghani stay. I have no idea how many more young men like this are coming in. I know that it's a disaster at every level. And I honestly don't believe when Sunak tells the country they're going to stop the boats, I don't believe it's even possible, given British judges and where they sit on all of these issues, if we stay part of the ECHR. I literally don't believe it's possible, because the Human Rights Act of '98 was based upon that convention, a convention written in the late 1940s in the wake of the horrors of the Holocaust, but now not relevant to the modern world in which we live. So my depressing message, Dan, for you and your viewers and listeners tonight is expect much more of this.
No, I completely agree with you about the ECHR. I do. But I think what has been so shocking, Nigel, about the murder of Thomas Roberts is the lack of will from the political establishment, the media establishment, to cover this case and to link it to what is going on politically.
So The Guardian today, I read it cover to cover. I went through it twice. There wasn't a single mention in The Guardian of this case. I listened to the Today programme this morning. It's my morning purgatory. I sort of just put myself through it. It sort of encourages me to go on GB News and do my best. No mention of it. Yes, mention of other people who've been let out on probation and committed murder, and that's awful. And all crime is awful. All murder is awful. But I didn't hear it on the Today programme either. And it's as if they want to sweep this whole issue under the carpet.
Well, they do, though, don't they? That is literally what they want to do.
Yeah, and literally. And the only reason the Conservatives are even talking about it is because the Red Wall are up in arms, because they voted for Brexit believing they get border controls. And then I'll remind you, the week before the referendum in 2016, I stood before a poster, a breaking point poster, showing a snaking line of young men coming into Eastern Europe. I mean, I was condemned for it. You would have thought I was a 1930s fascist European leader for daring to say it. I believed that Brexit would protect us from idiotic EU policies, and yet it's happening anyway.
No, it is. It is. And they don't want to talk about it, Nigel. And in fact, let's just be honest about this. If you hadn't started talking about this issue in 2019 and 2020, it would have been completely ignored by the political establishment. The only reason they talk about it at all is because you put it on the political agenda, and then GB News launched, and we have shone a light on the story. I mean, that is a fact.
Yes, and we've broken exclusive after exclusive.
Yep.
You know, I've been out into the English Channel repeatedly with cameras, filming all this stuff. And it is the realization that it's mostly young men, some would say young men of fighting age, coming into our country. And I get emails and reports every single day. And some of the things I'm told, I can't even repeat on air. But I'm told of conversations that are overheard or understood from some of these young men and their attitudes towards Western culture, their attitudes towards women in particular, their attitudes towards the advancement of their religion above virtually everything. This is terrifying stuff.
It is, and we will keep on it because it is so important that this murder of Thomas Roberts is not in vain. Nigel Farage, your show was must watch actually earlier tonight. I loved that interview with Polly Toynbee, speaking of The Guardian. So that's worth catching again at midnight, and of course Nigel back on air at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. But coming up, after Labour backbencher Rosie Duffield was shouted down by her own colleagues during a gender recognition debate, is J.K. Rowling right that the Labour Party has let her down? And is our very own Amanda Patel right that the BBC is willfully ignoring the issue? My superstar panel, including Amanda, will get into this in the Media Buzz after 10. But first, with former Daily Telegraph editor Charles Moore questioning the merit of Prince Andrew's exile, should we reassess how we feel about the disgraced Duke? US political heavyweight and legal analyst Megyn Kelly joins me live straight after the break.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's Megyn Kelly time. Now, there's been a significant change of narrative around Prince Andrew's sex scandal since his alleged victim, Virginia Giuffre, dropped a separate claim against Jeffrey Epstein lawyer Alan Dershowitz last year, admitting she, quote, may have made a mistake by accusing the Harvard law professor of sexual assault. Rumblings from royal quarters suggest the Duke of York may now bid to get his multi-million-pound settlement with Giuffre overturned. He's consulting lawyers, reportedly. Andrew is finding growing support here in the UK, with respected Daily Telegraph columnist and the former editor of that newspaper, Charles Moore, admitting he thinks Prince Andrew may well be innocent. Moore wrote he never accepted liability but paid her money anyway. At the time, he was under pressure to settle in order to avoid overshadowing the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee. I do sense that he may have right on his side. So, Megyn, before you became, superstar broadcaster, you were America's top legal analyst. So I'm fascinated to know whether you think we were maybe too quick to dismiss the innocence of a disgraced Prince Andrew.
Well, and I practiced law for 10 years, Dan. So, I mean, I have a history in this lane, but I came on your show about a year ago when he was thinking about settling this case and said there are serious problems with Virginia Giuffre's credibility. And that's not to say that she wasn't trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. I believe she was. But she is, to say she is an imperfect witness is to be very charitable to her. Virginia Giuffre has not been able to keep her story straight from the beginning. The dates, the date she began working for Epstein, the date she was first trafficked. I mean, she's off by years. She offers a vivid memory. She remembers all these things exactly where she was. And then you find out none of that happened for another 2 years later. And I mean, I could go on. And the reason, by the way, that news about her dropping the case against Alan Dershowitz, professor at Harvard, we broke that on our show. And Alan came on and told us how he did it. He was wrongly targeted by Virginia Giuffre. I will believe that until the day I die. She decided to name Alan Dershowitz because a reporter told her to. A reporter told her she'd get a lot more attention if she named Alan Dershowitz, who they had a whole movie made about his legal career, one case in particular called Reversal of Fortune. And that's why she went after him. And the only other person she publicly named was Prince Andrew, because she was looking for attention. All right. Now, that's not to say that Prince Andrew's not necessarily in the same camp as Dershowitz, who, as a famous lawyer, had receipts. He could prove he wasn't anywhere near the places she said he was at the times in question. Could Andrew have done that? I don't know. I believe he was forced to settle the case. I believe he probably would have been able to mount some sort of a defense if he'd gone to trial because of her credibility issues. So I don't know why he settled it, but he did settle it. And the notion that he's now going to be able to blow up the settlement, to vacate it, is absolutely absurd. That's not going to happen. The reasons they let you blow up a settlement that you've signed voluntarily are things like duress, not the Platinum Jubilee was coming up. Duress, like someone had a gun to my head and said, I'm going to pull the trigger unless you sign on the dotted line. That's the level of things it takes to get a settlement deal like this blown up. He's not going to do it. He should walk away. He cut the deal, and the people will have to decide for themselves whether they believe she's got enough credibility to make this claim.
But Megyn, could this become a PR strategy for him? Because what we're hearing is that behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace, the late Queen, for example, had said that Andrew would still be able to use his HRH titles. Even King Charles, who previously had been absolutely adamant that there was no future role for Andrew, is starting to waver because of the credibility issues around Giuffre. So could his lawyers try and blow up the settlement as a PR strategy, and then you get out there in the press this idea that the only reason he settled was because he didn't want his late mother's final year on Earth to be dominated by the coverage of his suit?
They might, but look, let's talk about what we know Prince Andrew did. All right, we don't have to spend much time on Virginia Giuffre. That's a he said, she said at this point. She's got serious credibility problems, but so, by the way, does he. All right. I don't need to refer you back to that disastrous BBC interview. I don't sweat all that. They both have serious credibility issues.
Yeah,
okay.
awful.
But let's look at what we know he did. And I'm telling you, if I were sitting in the jury booth so far, I would not convict this guy of having molested Virginia Giuffre. But we know he went to Jeffrey Epstein's house after Jeffrey Epstein had pleaded guilty to solicitation of child sex prostitute. There's no child prostitution. That's sexual abuse. Okay. There's no 14-year-old who was the girl in the Jeffrey Epstein case he pleaded guilty to having a sexual intercourse with or having a relation with.
And he spent days there.
And not just that, Dan, but if you go back and you look at the papers when Epstein pleaded guilty to that in 2008, it was all over the place what they actually thought he had done. That the New York Post described it as a virtual conga line of young women going into Epstein's house for these massages. So at a minimum, Prince Andrew knew about that and still thought it'd be a great idea to befriend the guy and go stay at his house for days on end. Why don't you decide whether you want to convict him of that? That's what you should base the royal titles on and all that stuff, because that we know he did.
Yeah, I know. I think there are lots of holes in Andrew's story. You know, when we had this discussion last year, I was very clear that forget the pressure coming from the palace. If you want us to believe you, you cannot settle with Giuffre. And I still do feel that way. But now that I'm learning about the pressure he's under and the fact that he's trying to not destroy his mother's final months on Earth, we know by this point that she was suffering from terminal cancer, Meghan. I'm just looking at it in a slightly different way. I do think, though, by the way, this claim from jailed Ghislaine Maxwell that the picture is fake, I think that's complete baloney.
That's not worth anything. We should spend more time looking at what Alan Dershowitz says, who is a famous lawyer for a reason. He's reportedly now actually advising Prince Andrew on how to handle this because Alan did it right. He fought and he fought hard. And I recognize Prince Andrew's not really in the same lane when it comes to those abilities for the reasons you just outlined, but he did settle.
Not the sharpest tool in the shed, Meghan. It's fair to say, not the sharpest tool in the shed, and it's caused him a lot of issues. Meghan Kelly, who is the sharpest tool in the shed, host of the brilliant Meghan Kelly Show, which you can find on Sirius XM, YouTube, and as a podcast. Thank you so much, Meghan. But coming up, with Benefit Britain, illegal migration, and lefty lackey Owen Jones in the firing line, tonight's journey into the real world with Lee Anderson promises, well, fireworks. Westminster Stuff for Stalking MP joins me live in the studio at the special time of 10:20 tonight. But first, after Labour MP Rosie Duffield is berated by misogynists within her own party, is J.K. Rowling right that Labour have let her down? And why are the BBC so keen to avoid this story? My superstar panel give their thoughts on this and tomorrow's newspaper front pages and the media buzz. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, folk like me and many viewers of GB News were dismissed as hysterics or worse. But two despicable failures of the system prove why we were right to raise the alarm on migrants slipping through the net and the war on women. So first, Westminster's toughest talking MP, Lee Anderson, rails against the catalogue of errors that saw a killer and convicted drug dealer con the Home Office into letting him into the country, allowing him to murder an aspiring Royal Marine. That coming up at 10:20. Then, Calvin Mackenzie tackles the case of a double rapist in Scotland sent to a women's prison after identifying as female, a very important uncancelled at 10:45. And given this is exactly what Brave Labour MP Rosie Duffield has been campaigning about, why is the BBC ignoring her ordeal at the hands of her own party, as our superstar panellist Amanda Platel has opined? The top Daily Mail columnists will join Reverend Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid to debate that next. Plus, could the legalisation of assisted dying be exploited as a solution to the NHS crisis? That's the concern of a Church of Scotland leader. We'll get into it at 10:30. And what happened when Al Calvin turned up the heat on Greta Thunberg in Davos?
You seem to be joining the establishment, not fighting them anymore. Are you not one of them?
One of who?
She knows she is. I can't wait to bring you more of that when my panel nominate today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass at 10:50. The first newspaper front pages will arrive in mere moments too, right after Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. And the top story on GB News tonight, it's been confirmed the British aid workers Andrew Bagshaw and Christopher Parry, who'd gone missing in Ukraine, were killed trying to help civilians flee shelling in Ukraine. Their families have released a statement saying, "It is with great sadness we have to announce that our beloved Chrissy has been killed along with his colleague Andrew Bagshaw while attempting a humanitarian evacuation from Soledar in eastern Ukraine." The pair had been attempting to rescue an elderly woman in an area of intense military action when their car was hit by an artillery shell. They were last seen on January the 6th. Well, the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has reportedly decided to send Leopard 2 tanks into Ukraine and is allowing other countries like Poland to do the same. Reports suggest a full decision on whether or not to allow Poland to send in its tanks could be made as early as this week. The Polish Defence Minister made the request, saying the security of the whole of Europe was at stake. And here, Boris Johnson urged other countries to follow the UK's example in providing tanks and weapons it needs to win the war against Russia. In his nightly video address, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, said Ukraine needs decisions on deliveries of modern tanks to strengthen their defence. Here, a relative of the murder victim, Zara Alina, says probation officers have blood on their hands after a report found her killer was released from prison just days before he carried out the attack. Jordan McSweeney was given a life sentence last month after he admitted killing the law graduate. He attacked 35-year-old Zara in East London as she walked home after a night out last June. The findings of the report showed that McSweeney should have been treated as a high risk of serious harm offender, but he was wrongly graded by the probation service as medium risk. Zara's aunt, Farah Naz, says more needs to be done to avoid the same thing happening again.
Our streets are not safe. Probation work has to be tight, has to be high quality, because the risks, the stake is high. The stake is lives. Zara's life was taken, and probation have blood on their hands.
Well, lastly tonight, Princess Eugenie says she and her husband Jack Brooksbank are delighted to be expecting their second child. A photograph released on Instagram by the princess shows the couple's first child, August, hugging his mum's pregnant tummy. In a statement, the royal family said they were delighted too, and August is very much looking forward to being a big brother. That's all the news. Back now to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow News Tonight in our Media Buzz. So I think just one front page so far, and it's the Metro, which proclaims it's grim up north after their think tank revealed that despite the government's levelling up policy, the north of England has some of the lowest spending advances of any economy. My superstar panel back with me now. Top Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. After releasing a bombshell article, Rosie Duffield is rightly at war with her out-of-touch party over the trans debate, accusing Labour of having a woman problem and comparing her treatment to being in a, quote, abusive relationship. And in a sensational development, Labour's spin doctor Matthew Doyle has been caught on tape directly briefing against Duffield. Listen to this.
So therefore it would just be yeah, I mean, she's been deceived here a number of times, you know, but she also then just does some incredible things. There are people in Canterbury who say, you know,
Now, J.K. Rowling came out to defend her fellow campaigner, writing, Rosie Duffield, an ex-assistant teacher, single mother and survivor of domestic abuse, won Labour a seat they thought was unwinnable. Post-Corbyn, she was returned to Parliament with an increased majority. This is how Labour repays her. The mainstream media, however, would rather pretend that this political witch hunt isn't happening. In an excellent commentary piece for the Daily Mail, my superstar panellist Amanda Platel calls attention to the lack of coverage from the BBC on Duffield. Amanda writes, it took great courage for her to defend women's rights in the face of boorish male heckling from her own party, yet the BBC preferred to concentrate instead on Rishi and his seatbelt. The PM's transgression was accidental, but the corporation's is cold, cruel and calculated. So, Amanda Platel, such an important point. We spoke at the top of the show about this BBC witch hunt against Nadeem Zahawi. According to your column, you couldn't find anything.
Dan, I just went onto the BBC website search function, and I put in Rishi Sunak. Up came 3 pieces about his seatbelt. Right, guy sits in the back of the car for a few minutes without his seatbelt on. You know, sack the guy. You know, absolutely outrageous. I put in Rosie Duffield, and there was one mention of her, which was an article that was written in September last year. And when I put in Rosie Duffield trans, nothing came up. I mean, now that is a small survey, but it shows you that the priority, that the mainstream media can't bear to accept the fact that Labour has a problem with women. They're women hating. This woman won a seat that had been a Tory seat for 99 years. She's heroic. She's championed women's rights, and they just want to cancel her.
I mean, Calvin Robinson, it is extraordinary, isn't it? This is a civil war gripping the Labour Party. This, mark my words, will be one of the biggest issues at the next general election. It could actually be the Tories' best hope of stopping Slippery Starmer becoming Prime Minister, because he can't even say what a woman is. He can't even define a woman. and yet the BBC ignore it.
Of course they do. It doesn't meet their agenda, does it? It's quite interesting. Rosie Duffield is one of the very few people in the Labour Party who can say what a woman is. But how do they treat her? And it doesn't matter what her opinion is or what the issue is. How do they treat her? The men in the room shout her down, which just shows you how misogynistic this trans movement is.
And they're briefing against her.
And they're briefing against her behind their back.
He would not have briefed that. I'm a former spin doctor. You would not brief that unless you got authority from the leader of the party.
So you think... he would... So just to be clear...
There is no way that the head of his communications would have briefed against Rosie if it had not been approved by Starmer.
Well, they did imply that, didn't they? They said she's been in to see Starmer a couple of times.
And she said, no, I've seen him once.
So Rebecca, you don't think there's proof that Starmer is directly briefing against
I don't know, and
Duffield?
I think it's
But would you
admit,
admit, given that he is his direct spokesperson, that there is at least the possibility?
I don't think it's helpful to start speculating about possibilities. This is a bad enough problem. Isn't that what you do?
That's what we do, isn't it?
No, I don't. What would this person maybe have done this or maybe have said this? I don't think that's what we do.
So let me just be clear.
Actually, I'm
You've
the
got
only
someone's spokesman on tape briefing against a PM.
Yeah, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. How would one
I'm the only one who's
possibly
actually
know?
worked in this business.
You were William Hague, spin doctor.
I know, and the only other way that it's not directly given by the leader is it's given to someone else that gives it to you as the spin doctor, so you can go on record and say, no, Starmer didn't tell me, it was one of his other advisors. He would not have said that unless it was approved. He was not going rogue on that briefing.
Whether that's true or not, I think the issue is that Labour...
Is Labour's treatment of Duffield disgraceful from a left-wing point of view?
I think Labour's problem is that they feel, I think probably correctly, I'm speculating now, that the next election is theirs to lose. Therefore, it seems, I'm speculating again, it seems that the policy should be just don't do anything to screw this up. And high-profile, emotive conversations like the trans debate, even though there are literally 0.5% people in this country who are trans, derail this. And then
but there's
and it's a...
Sorry, Becky.
No, sorry, but just to clarify, I think I don't think they care what Rosie Duffield is saying. I think they care that she's saying anything, because I think that the idea is to do as little as possible and wait to win.
Because Keir Starmer is all over the place on this. First of all, on the Scottish bill, he said that he didn't think it was OK to identify at 16. Then he came out and supported the bill, which contains the legislation that says it is OK. And this is also the man, I mean, you know, this is a guy who said... when he was asked, what is a woman, can a woman have a penis? And he said, the vast majority of women don't have a penis.
That's not untrue.
But a tiny minority do. Women don't have penises.
Well, intersex women do have penises.
Do you think a woman can have a penis, Rebecca?
I don't know. I'm not useful in this conversation. I am not learned in this conversation.
You're a woman. Are you not worried?
I know I don't have a penis.
Yeah,
Does that help?
Worried, because the thing is, you talk about the tiny percentage of trans people.
Yeah.
That's the point. That is the point. Do you not understand? There is a war on you. There is a war on women
There has been a war on me since I was 13 and getting catcalled in a school uniform, and these men didn't care about that. There has been a war on me since I was first sexually assaulted in my early teens. No, none of these men who are shouting about this give a word I can't say about the war on women unless it's this point. But where is this conversation about? Where is this conversation about?
I think it's terrible to say that men don't care about women.
I do not hear men having this conversation about sexual assault, sexual harassment, about maternity leave, about benefits, about any of the other things that impact women. I only hear men getting annoyed about this.
That's nonsense. But
why don't they care about the other ones that actually do
impact? Why have you joined the other side of the argument now?
Enjoy what side? As a woman, I care about the aspects.
Women?
Because no trans person has in any way ever inconvenienced me. Lots of men have.
This bill directly inconveniences women.
It does not.
We've just seen.
How?
We've just seen again another instance of rape in a women's prison with a so-called woman with a penis. This would not happen if we just said, look, men have penises, women do not.
But this conversation...
So you are putting women in danger by going against this narrative.
Women are already in danger every single day.
So then why make it worse?
The person you're most likely to be sexually assaulted by is somebody you know, is a friend or a partner. Statistically, is a man who you know, not a stranger.
I just think that, you know...
You're letting the side down.
I am not letting the side down. This is if we want to have a conversation about women's rights, let's...
Because you're using whataboutery, saying these men only fight when it comes to the trans issue. They don't fight on issues of sexual abuse.
It's true.
That's not true because I've fought on this issue and I've been on my
When
show
have we
talking
ever
about
had a conversation about any of these things?
Talking about these things, absolutely have. But the problem is you're pushing it off onto the men. I'm talking about you. Why are you not going to say, look, a woman is an adult human female, and I am a woman, and I'm proud of that, and you cannot call yourself a woman if you have a penis? Why don't you do that?
Why don't I do that? Because I don't think I know enough about what it means to be trans to make a meaningful ruling about who can be. I know I'm a woman, and I know that my womanhood is not tied to the fact. Well, I know that I'm a woman, and I know that my experience of being a woman has not been impacted by any trans people, but has been impacted by lots of other things which never get talked about.
With all due respect to Rebecca, whom I greatly like and admire, it was women like me of my generation that fought so hard for this generation of women who fought for what it was like to be a woman, to get equal rights in the workplace. We actually were the forefront of feminism, and then we turn around and your lot just say, oh, you know, you can have a penis and you can still be a woman. It makes my blood boil.
Indeed. OK, fascinating debate. Look, in royal news now, congratulations are in order after Princess Eugenie and her husband Jack Brooksbank revealed today they were expecting a second child. The announcement offers a rare bit of good news for the royal family after enduring the Prince Andrew scandal, the death of the late Queen and the recent publication of Spare. But I must admit, I'm a bit sceptical about Eugenie rubbing shoulders at the World Economic Forum in Davos, especially after she gave this interview about wanting to make her young children climate activists.
My son's going to be like an activist from 2 years old, which is in a couple of days. All I think about is what happens to rising sea levels and the communities that are on the beaches who depend solely on the sea. As well as what August can do about it in the future, you know, and what his education will be. So at home we have no plastic, and we try to, as much as possible, have no plastic, and I'm trying to teach him that, but, you know, it's a battle.
OK, so we're making 2-year-old activists now. Eugenie, I'd advise you to stay away from the woke Kool-Aid that Harry's been cooking up for you and Montecito. She's changed after going out there to meet up with her cousin again. Rebecca Reed, Gowan Robinson and Amanda Platel, do stand by, because coming up, could the legalisation of assisted dying be exploited in the name of the NHS crisis? Well, that's the concern of a Church of Scotland leader, and I'm going to get the views of my superstar panel when the Media Buzz returns after 10:30. But first, how did a killer and convicted drug dealer con the Home Office into allowing him into the country and killing again? Our toughest talking MP, Lee Anderson, tackles that horrifying incident, delivers a warning to Benefits Britain and reacts to being named Westminster's most obnoxious by none other than the most obnoxious man in the country, Owen Jones. You won't want to miss that straight after the break.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
You even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Time now for The Real World with Lee Anderson. And in a reality check for The Nation, it's been revealed that over half of British households take more from the state than they put in, with the top 10% of earners contributing 53% of all income tax received by the government. And with commentators like the Daily Mail's Richard Littlejohn suggesting too many have gotten used to pandemic-era handouts, Benefit Britain is bordering on broken. The use of food banks also continues to rise, which has led Westminster's toughest talking MP, Lee Anderson, to hit back. The Conservative Home Backbench MP of the Year caused a stir by saying that during his time working at the Citizens Advice Bureau, many service users were wasting their money on, quote, fags, booze and Sky TV. And I'm delighted to say Lee joins me now in the studio. So, Lee, you've had a lot of flack about these comments regarding food banks, but in reality, I actually view it as very uncontroversial to say that if you're earning £35,000 a year, which is well above the average wage, and you are having to use a food bank, there clearly is another issue, isn't there? It's not about your pay. It's either about you've got a gambling problem or you're drinking too much, you're spending money on drugs. Because at £35,000 a year, you shouldn't be having to use a food bank.
Well, look, Dan, before I came into Parliament, I wasn't earning anywhere near £35,000 a week, and I wasn't using a food bank. I run a car, I've got a wife, I've got a house, I've got a mortgage to pay, all that. Now, I hear these ridiculous stories that nurses, who I respect 100%, by the way, they are stealing food off patients' plates, they're going to food banks, and quite frankly, I don't believe a word of it. This is just a narrative pushed out by the unions, The Guardian, the Daily Mirror, people like that idiot Owen Jones, he's talking nonsense about this. It's pathetic.
We'll talk about him later.
The average wage in Ashford is about 28 grand, and most of Ashford are not using food banks. I've been to a food bank, I've helped out at the food bank, and quite frankly, 35 grand, that's enough to live on in a place like Ashfield. People are living in London on less than 35 grand.
But you get turned on for that?
Turned on all the time, you know. I mean, somebody asked me last week to produce a breakfast for 30 pence, the 30p Lee scenario. I showed them a bowl of Weetabix, that's 20 pence. Oh, what do you expect us to do? Live on Weetabix for the rest of our lives? Nonsense. People can budget. People sometimes need a little bit of education because we've got third generation now, Dan, that's not learned how to cook properly, not learned how to budget. There's been no proper role models in the house. The state have sort of had to take over managing people. That's wrong.
Well, it's Benefits Britain, isn't it?
It is Benefits
That's what's
Britain.
happening, and that's what Littlejohn was saying this morning.
Exactly. People are so, like third or fourth generation now, so dependent on benefits. They class, especially some people who work. I mean, I work with them at the CAB. When they got their dole money at the week, they said that was wages. And I said, well, hold on a minute, that's not your wages. That's the state giving you a handout to help you through a difficult time. That should never be a way of life. That should be a hand up, but, you know, we should take personal responsibility. The state's there to make sure we've got decent police, decent health service, decent education system, good law and order. The rest you should really do yourself.
Indeed. Now, look, British Border Force sources now fear our shores could be welcoming 80,000 people, Lee, by the end of the year, double the number of illegal migrants who arrived across the Channel this year. But our broken immigration system has been thrust into the headlines after a convicted killer was allowed to enter the UK by conning officials with a bogus asylum claim before he brutally murdered aspiring Royal Marine Thomas Roberts last March. Lee, this is such a disturbing story. My heart breaks for the family of Thomas Roberts, but this is why folk like you and me have been saying we cannot allow these vast numbers of illegals to enter the country. I mean, this guy lied. He said he was 14 years old. Yep. He said his parents were killed by the Taliban. He was a murderer. He was a literal murderer. If he had been properly investigated, they would have found out he was a murderer in another country.
Dan, I feel sick to the pit of my stomach reading about this today. He's a creature, he's not a man. He's a creature that's murdered abroad. He's come here, he's told lies. He's been put in foster care. It's cost the British taxpayer thousands and thousands of pounds. And now we're going to put him in prison for 20 odd years. It's going to cost the British taxpayer thousands and thousands of pounds again. That's not the answer. And I think the answer is, and I'll say this with a heavy heart, it's probably at the end of a rope. I believe in the death penalty for cases like this. He should be put to sleep. Absolute waste of space. He should not be on this earth. He's done a wicked, awful thing. And that family's got to live with this for the rest of their lives. There's no place in society. But you know what? When these people come on the boat or whichever way they get here, I've said from day one, Dan, they should be detained. We don't know where they've come from until we can find out properly where they've come from and what they've been up to. Just lock them up in a detention centre till we know. Because at the end of the day, the British public should come first, always.
But Lee, we are accused of being the heartless ones when we have this conversation. Well, tell that to the family of Thomas Roberts, who will never have their son as part of their family again. You know, this was an aspiring Royal Marine. By all accounts, a guy with a huge future ahead. And we should all be worried, shouldn't we? Because these criminals are streaming in. And I'm not saying they are all criminals, but you only need for there to be one.
No, I disagree with you. I think they're all criminals. I think when they get here illegally, they have broken the law and they shouldn't be here. And, you know, we should not be ferrying them off to a processing centre and then to a four-star hotel. As far as I'm concerned, said it since day one, should be put in a detention centre. They should not be allowed roaming the streets, terrorising people. Lock them up, keep them there, keep us safe, and let's, speed these applications up and get them sent back.
Exactly, because there's no deterrent at the moment. And, personally, I think it should be offshore.
I agree 100%.
Where they are processed. But look, it's fair to say Lee's recent times and the headlines has rubbed the left up the wrong way, and who better represents them than the bedwetting Corbynista Owen Jones, who has posed a question to the nation in his usual sincere and charming fashion.
It's a competitive field, I grant you that, but is Lee Anderson the most obnoxious Conservative MP that there is? As far as I can tell, his stock in trade is just saying obnoxious things he knows will annoy anyone vaguely to the left of Genghis Khan.
That's a big compliment, isn't it?
Well, I think he's got a crush on me, Dan, don't you? What a pathetic, snivelling little weasel he is. I mean, he pops up in The Guardian, he pops up on social media. Nobody's really paying much attention to this idiot. I think he's had his day. I looked on his Twitter today, and I think to sign up to be a patron to listen to this nonsense, it's going to cost the hard-up Britons £100 a month. Oh. What an hypocrite. This is a man who champions the working class. He pretends he's a working-class hero. You know what? He has never done a decent day's work in his life. He's a pathetic little man.
Yeah, and let's see how big his Guardian pay package is.
Well, bring that Guardian to me. I'll deal with that Guardian.
For £100. Now, Lee, look, you've got your beautiful blue Brexit passport here. What's going on? You're off somewhere.
You say it's blue, Dan. I mean, it looks black to me, but I will take your word for it.
We had this debate.
Yeah, we've had this argument.
I think you're a little bit
I'm off. I'm not off on my holidays tomorrow. I'm going to France for a few days to look at these migrant centres and look at the problems we've got in over there. You know, I wanted to go much earlier than this. I think it's my duty as a member of Parliament, somebody who sits on the Home Affairs Select Committee, to go and see this nonsense first and then, report back what's actually happening, not what the left would like you, to
OK, well, good. Go and find out, and then you'll be back at your usual time next Wednesday, and you can report back on what you've found out. Lee Anderson, good stuff. Have a safe trip. But coming up, why was a double rapist in Scotland sent to a women's prison after identifying as a female? Calvin Mackenzie tackles this alarming development head-on at 10:45. But first, if assisted dying is legalised, will it be exploited as a solution to the NHS crisis the Church of Scotland fears so? But what do my superstar panel make of it? They'll return next, and we'll have more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you in the Media Buzz too. Back in a moment.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. I've got lots more front pages here. The Guardian leads with the news that Germany's government has U-turned and will now send tanks to Ukraine, having bowed to pressure from around the Western world. The Sun leads with Squid Game horror in UK after secret filming of Netflix's real-life version of the hit show was hampered by the Great British weather. One contestant was dramatically stretchered off set, with several others suffering frostbite as temperatures plummeted across the country. I can just clarify, by the way, this Squid Game, they don't actually die. That's the difference in the real-life version of the show. The Daily Mail leads with news that Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is facing mounting pressure to deliver a growth plan after national debt hits £2.5 trillion. There's no growth plan coming from high-tax Hunt, let me tell you. And is there a spy in your fridge? Well, according to the Daily Star, you may want to check your household appliances after cyber experts warn that sneaky Chinese agents could be using microchips in fridges, doorbells and laptops to spy on unsuspecting Brits. My superstar panel back with me now, top Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, the Reverend Calvin Robinson and the author Rebecca Reid. Now, the moderator of the Church of Scotland has raised his concern around a proposed bill that will be introduced to Parliament this year that would legalise assisted dying in Scotland. So in a comment piece for the Scotsman newspaper, Right Reverend Dr Ian Greenshields stressed that letting terminally ill patients legally end their lives would permanently change the NHS and could be turned into a form of cost saving, putting the vulnerable at risk. He writes, given the pressure on healthcare resources, we are also very concerned that assisted dying could be seen as providing an opportunity for cost saving. We are concerned that should assisted dying be legalised, the way our society views older people and those with disabilities will over time become more utilitarian. The lives of those on the margins of society will inevitably come to be seen as less valuable or even burdensome. And while the prospect is, of course, a morbid one, Greenshields' concern might be valid. Assisted dying could save the healthcare system up to £84 million per year, based on data from Canada, where the policy is currently legal. So, Calvin Robinson, you're very passionate against the idea of euthanasia. Is this one of the reasons why that you think the NHS could actually end up seeing it as some sort of cost-saving measure?
Yeah, I'm very pro-life, and this is one of the main reasons. First of all, it's great to see the Church of Scotland being sound on something, because they're usually incredibly wet, so props to the Right Reverend Greenshields. But we've seen this in Canada already. They're killing 10,000 people per year, and we've seen the reasons why they're killing people. So it's not just the extremities, it's not just people who are terminally ill and may never recover. It's not out of compassion. People who are poor are being offered assisted suicide. People who are homeless are being offered it as a solution. The mentally ill and the depressed. And I'm not even talking about the seriously depressed. I'm talking about relatively young, early 20s people who are struggling to get girlfriends.
Yeah.
We're talking about veterans who have no support being offered assisted suicide. The state should not have the power to kill people out of convenience or cost saving. And that's what this is. It's evil. There was a Paralympian in a wheelchair, a veteran in Canada, who couldn't get a stair lift and struggled to get up and down the stairs, called for help, was offered assisted suicide. It's like, this is the slippery slope that we're talking about. It's very, very real.
Out of interest, do you believe in the death penalty?
I don't think the state should have the power to kill people.
OK, fine. No, that was purely out of interest.
It is interesting, though, isn't it, Rebecca? Because not entirely, but this issue does often break down on a party political, or at least a left-right
I don't think it is.
Toynbee was on Farage earlier advocating for legalised dying. You, I believe, support euthanasia.
I don't think it's a left-right thing. I think it's a person-person thing. In theory, I would approve of it, but I think the implementation would be problematic. Also, the idea that we could save £84 million, that's like 9 gloves for the NHS or whatever, like £84 million wouldn't make any real difference. But the idea that we're doing it as a cost-saving measure sort of undermines my belief in doing it. Having watched people I love die and thought this would be so much easier when you know they're dying, for a doctor to have the option to give them more morphine, that would seem practical to me. But centres where you can go and say, I've had a rough week, so just, guillotine me, feel questionable and possibly
They don't
wrong.
do it with the guillotine.
No, well, I would want, if I was going to have it, I would want to go guillotine. I'd want to go guillotine.
Are you pro-assisted legalised dying? And if so, do you have these concerns about the NHS using it as a cost-saving measure?
I am 1,000,000% against it. First of all, as Rebecca says, the cost of it, the NHS spends £108 billion a day. What is 85 million gonna? It's not even going to scratch the surface.
They spend £108 billion a day.
I'm afraid. What did you say? You just went like that.
Yeah, I don't think you've.
I don't think that.
Oh God!
Silly
bad.
girl.
Sorry.
We can't hear a single word
Okay, we
we're
can
saying.
prove that this is live TV.
But what I will say, while Amanda's fiddling around with the microphone, what I will say is, we'll come to you.
Well, then turn your microphone
Is
on.
that working now? Is that working
Well,
now?
you don't even have it on.
It is on.
Is it
It's the blue lights on.
But Dan, we've lost our moral compass.
No. Excuse me, I want to say something. It's my turn.
Look, it's my turn. It's annoying that she left the mic off, but I don't think you can say she's lost the moral compass.
Okay.
Say what you wanted to say, we can hear you.
Very serious thing to say. I'm totally opposed to it on faith grounds, because I'm a Christian, and I think it's against all of our teachings. I'm secondly against the mathematics, as we just said, just do not add up. Thirdly, my grandfather committed suicide, and he was only in his late 60s, and his wife Nana had died, and he was distraught, and he moved out of his house. He moved into a high-rise, not high-rise, sort of he was on the 4th floor of an apartment block. And I will never be able to get out of my head the image of the black scuffing of his shoes as he sat on the balcony for hours before he jumped. Okay, and we as a family, it was a different time. We didn't really understand as much as we could in terms of helping people. We understand that now, and it haunts me to this day. And I think that instead of helping people to die, we should be helping people to live.
Yeah. Indeed, that's so powerful.
That's your really serious face on, Dan.
No, that's very powerful.
Jesus.
That really touched me.
But we could have changed. We could have kept him, Dan. We could have had him around for another 10 years. Pop could have been around if we'd just, instead of just left him to get on with his own devices, and he felt worthless and useless and...
So terrible. OK, today marked the most nail-biting date in the Lovey calendar as the nominations for the 95th Oscars ceremony were revealed. Leading the pack, timeline-jumping action movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, with 11 nominations, including Best Picture, where it will compete against The Usual Pretentious fare, as well as the movies people have actually seen. Good on the Oscars for this. Top Gun Maverick and Avatar also nominated. Among the British and Irish stars in contention for top acting prizes, Bill Nighy for Seize the Day drama Living, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, who play feuding friends in The Banshees of Inisherin, and Paul Mescal landing a surprise first Oscar nod for father and daughter sobfest After Sun less than 3 years after his on-screen debut in the BBC's Normal People. Now, the nominations are usually a chance for the acting elite to pat each other on the back, but presenters Riz Ahmed and Get Out star Alison Williams couldn't resist making a dig at a malicious A-lister currently taking Hollywood by storm. Watch.
Riz, this is a delight. I don't want this to end. I have to say it's much easier working with you than Megan. She is tricky.
Yeah, I heard that she's tricky. But she's not around, is she? You promised me that she wouldn't be around?
Yeah. No, we should be good. We're good.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, we'll be right back because in just a few minutes we've got more nominee announcements coming up.
Don't worry, Sussex Squad. She wasn't referring to that Megan. No, she actually meant her co-star in the hit horror movie about a sinisterly perfect android who tries to eradicate its adopted family after going haywire. So no, there were no similarities at all. Rebecca Reed, Calvin Robinson, Amanda Patel, do stand by, because coming up, what happened when Calvin turned the heat on climate campaigner Greta Thunberg in Davos? I can't wait to see it. We'll show you as we crown today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But first, how on earth was a double rapist sent to an all-women's prison in Scotland after claiming to be a female? Well, Calvin Mackenzie tries to make sense of that alarming story. He's live in just 2 minutes' time.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. The stark danger of gender extremism was laid bare today after a transgender rapist convicted of 2 sex attacks against vulnerable women while a man was sent to a female prison. So this is Isla Bryson, who was previously known as Adam Graham, violently attacked the women in 2016 and 2019, but then transitioned after an initial court appearance which took place a month after the second assault. Bryson is expected to be held at an all-female institution in Stirling, but reportedly won't be held alongside the jail's general population. Susan Smith from the campaign group For Women Scotland said this shocking case exposes the dangers of Nicola Sturgeon's sick gender reform bill that would allow sex offenders to acquire a gender recognition certificate without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. She said this case indicates that predatory and abusive men will stop at nothing to manipulate courts and torture victims. We can only be grateful that some politicians still value women's safety and dignity. But for the UK government veto, this situation could have been so much worse for the victims. Now, this terrifying news today comes after SNP politicians over the weekend posed in front of despicable placards calling for the death of women's rights activists, including this sign that said "decapitate TERFs," a term coined by hateful trans extremists. Now, Scheming Sturgeon condemned the views on the placard and said it was not, quote, fair or credible to suggest the politicians' pictures share or condone them. Joining me now is Fleet Street legend Calvin Mackenzie. Calvin, this story today seems to me that concrete proof that Sturgeon's gender recognition bill is just a catastrophe waiting to happen.
Well, something is going to happen at some stage, and nobody could have forecast this was going to be the outcome. After all, in 2016, this guy, Adam Graham, he meets a woman online and he rapes her. 3 years later, he does exactly the same thing. Police then arrest him. When he's charged, suddenly the game changes. And he goes from Adam Graham to say, I'm transitioning, and now he's a lady called, Isla Bryson.
Isla Bryson.
So he's convicted today, and now he's off to where? Where does he go? And the answer to that is, I don't know how transitioned he is, or whether there is a definition for how long the transition must be. But the Scottish authorities, and of course this happens in our old friend Sturgeon's backyard, have a problem. What do? So what they do is they kind of make it work by putting her effectively into solitary, right? Something which wouldn't happen were she a woman, and definitely wouldn't happen if she were a man. So so justice is being turned on its head. And how can we tell that this isn't just a device by this guy, right, to get in among a lot of women where something absolutely dreadful may happen? And what does Sturgeon say about any of this? After all, she's entitled to have a view. He's now being convicted. So the judges, you can't be influenced on a sentence. Okay, so the conviction has taken place. Why doesn't she come out and say, do you know what? Either this doesn't change my mind at all. This is a one-off. This is never going to happen. I'm very happy with it myself? Or doesn't she come out and say, actually, I never thought that we would end up with a man with a penis charged with rape in among the very sexuality which he had found physically attractive? Why doesn't she just say one or the other? Not to say anything is quite wrong. And have you noticed that as she's pushed ahead with all this trans stuff, actually the country, their own country, the voting has started to go the other way on having a quotes free Scotland. It's now, there's only 46% in favour of it, right? So actually, people are not stupid. They've started to see what happens when you have somebody who becomes obsessed with one aspect of society running your country. Actually, it's dangerous for her. I'd be very interested to see how she tries to get out of this. But I was very taken by that lady, basically saying, there's not many times people are saying this. Thank God for Rishi Sunak, who is actually stopping this madness from spreading. Right, but how do the people of Scotland feel when they read about this or listen to this listen to this discussion?
The whole point is the Gender Recognition Act would mean that anyone could do this, including convicted sex offenders, without even having to get a diagnosis, without having to live in their new gender for any period of time. But I think what's most telling about this case, Calvin, is folk like me who have been calling Sturgeon out for her trans extremism have been called scaremongers. You know, we've been told, oh, there's only a very small percentage of the trans population. This isn't going to impact the safety of women. I'm sorry, cases like this bloke, Isla Bryson, make it absolutely abundantly clear that there are male rapists out there, sex predators, who will use these loopholes to put women at risk. And it's not about not wanting trans people to live their lives safely and peacefully, but we also have to allow biological women to live their lives safely and peacefully. And I'm sorry, if you are a female inmate in the prison that this bloke is going to, Calvin, you're not going to feel safe or peaceful.
Well, look, I agree with you there, man. The question is, what can the Scots now do about this? They have a law. They've passed it. They're not going to unpass it. So what does this mean? So if you are a, quotes, rapist, unquotes, then the answer, of course, is head across the border. Come up with some cock and bull yarn like this guy. After all, he now says, I've been thinking of transitioning since 4. No. But the only time he actually started it was after he had already raped 2 women.
Exactly.
The truth about the matter is that women in Scotland are...
Calvin? He's talking rubbish. I mean, this is the thing. It's made up. Well, let's just call it out for what it is. He's made this up to get into a women's prison.
OK, well, if that is right, that's what I think, and that's what any sensible person would think. But under Scottish law, they can't do anything now.
Nothing.
They are hamstrung, right? So they have to wait for an outcome which could be catastrophic.
Yeah, and Calvin, what about when
what happens to the politicians?
Exactly. And what about when it's not a prison, right? What about when it's a women's refuge or a school? You know, it's like maybe people aren't going to have as much sympathy because they're female prisoners. I don't know, but I just think this is so disturbing, and it is putting the safety of biological women at threat. That is clear.
Yeah, I agree. And but however, I want to hear what Sturgeon has to say.
Well, she won't be asked about it. That's the problem, because she's got a pathetically weak Scottish media who are largely in her pocket, because she's doing these press conferences. She's not asked difficult questions. It's a joke.
But the outcome may well be, well, let's keep our fingers crossed that the outcome is not as disastrous as his 2 previous forays.
Well, let's hope not. And we'll keep on this story, and we'll keep on Sturgeon on this. But
I would say for Sturgeon that she is running into serious political issues.
Yeah, because the people aren't with her on this. People aren't with her on this. Calvin McKenzie, we're going to keep on this, and we will speak next week. Thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Amanda Patel, who's your nominee for GB?
Mine's Boris Johnson, because he was the first world leader to actually pile in and said, we have to support Ukraine. Brilliant piece he wrote in the Daily Mail today, plug for the paper, but it's true.
It was the front page splash.
Absolutely moving, and good on him, because it's drawn dividends. So he's my hero this week.
Calvin Robinson, your GB?
Mine is Winston Churchill, because today is the 58th anniversary since his death.
And Rebecca Reed, your GB nominee.
I haven't got my piece of paper. I'm so sorry.
Oh, apparently you chose a woman called Emily Attack.
At least you had your mic. At least you had your mic on.
This actually is really important. Sorry, I'm not laughing at this.
Well, if it was important, you wouldn't have forgotten about it. So let's move on. I'm going with Winston Churchill, because you know it's Winston Churchill. I can't choose anyone else. Calvin knew that. Union Jackass time, Amanda Patel.
Naomi Campbell on the catwalk in Paris, wearing a black wolf coat which had a wolf's head on its shoulder. They're extinct in most parts of the world. And this is a woman who said that she'd never wear fur, but the picture of it's Kylie Jenner. She's sitting there with a lion, and this is just like hot juice for those horrible trophy hunters.
Oh, do you know what? You've just got so sensitive these days, Amanda.
It's
just fashion. It's fashion.
Yeah, OK, the next thing that'll happen is they'll be having...
real.
The next thing they'll be having is coats with cats on. Your Kirk will be on one of those coats.
Dirk, not Kirk. How dare you get my pussy's name wrong? Calvin, your Union Jackass nominee.
My new best friend, Greta Thunberg, I bumped into in Davos, talked to her for about 20 minutes, gave her the opportunity to put her point across. She had nothing at all to say. Lobbying
let's have a little look. Let's have a little look.
You seem to be joining the establishment, not fighting them anymore. Are you not one of them?
One of who?
What, the people on the private jets and the helicopters flying in here to tell us how to live our lives?
Yes, because I have many private jets of my own, yes.
Vacuous, absolutely empty. It seems without a teleprompter, she has nothing to say. You know, she's meeting the elite out there, influencing policy, but she cannot say anything on TV.
And Rebecca Reed, I think we just saw it, but you're clearly in direct competition with Amanda Patel today. Your nominee, Boris Johnson, I'm telling you, in case you've forgotten this.
No, I was going to change it to me for forgetting my piece of paper.
Or me for forgetting my mic.
Boris Johnson, because, listen, I'm not good with money, but £800k loan when you've got £500,000 advance? Get it together, Boris, financially, please.
Well, look, I'm going to go with Calvin. Double win for Calvin tonight in Greta Thunberg as the Union Jackass, because I thought those interviews were really telling, Calvin, because it proves she's really got nothing to say, does she? If she's not surrounded by her
she's got nothing to say to Calvin, to be fair.
But if you can't convince people who oppose you, if you have an argument to put across, what is the point of it?
I don't want to be rude, but I imagine she probably would want to talk to somebody with more...
So there were journalists with us that were on her side of the argument. She had nothing to say without her.
Journalists, it's a good thing. Calvin Robinson, Amanda Patel, Rebecca Reed, my superstar panel. What a night. I'm exhausted. But I will be back tomorrow from 9 p.m. Headliners is up next, though. Have a brilliant night. Good night.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us across the entire United Kingdom. We